Welcome to Speed of Light on the Pure Momentum Network, hosted by Sofia Smallstorm. I, of course, am not Sofia. My name is Peter Klein, and I will be guest hosting today's episode. But I assure you, this show will be very interesting, so stay with me and let's dig right in. Our topic of today's program is very mysterious, but a bit somber. I'm entitling today's program, The Mysterious and Untimely Death of Michael Cravey, otherwise known as Thomas Brinkley on YouTube and the internet at large. Michael died just 2 months ago on March 3rd, Monday, I believe. I think the best way to start would be for me to go back to when I first encountered Michael and also try to avoid speculating on what was going on in Michael's life before that time. Having a growing YouTube channel and a blog in place for some time before the Aurora Theater shooting, I vaguely remember seeing the name Thomas Brinkley on the web and may have even exchanged a few comments with him. But the point at which I took an interest in his material and ideas was right after the Aurora event, the Batman theater shooting, James Holmes. He released a short video whereby he addressed the blood trail seen behind the theater. He, like myself, was confused as to why nothing being reported about, the event seemed to work, given the evidence we could see, and the reports often conflicted with itself. At the same time, I produced a short clip about the blood trail as well. I had done some preliminary research into what kind of wounds would cause the very unique spatter, that's spatter, not splatter, by the way, pattern, the spatter pattern. After determining it was most likely an arterial wound, I could then determine where the person was and the direction of travel throughout the trail. What I didn't expect, and Michael didn't as well, was that the direction of travel was toward the rear theater exit, not away from it. Because the storyline that everyone accepted was that this was obviously someone escaping from the bloodbath that had taken place in the theater, and they were exiting and escaping. But instead, the trail was leading toward the exit. Anyway, so what I saw was that whether they escaped out the rear exit or not, at some point they suffered an arterial wound about 30 meters from the exit and began traveling toward the exit at a steady pace, which then left this trail. They left about 20 lengthy spatter groups or groupings that were nearly identical in shape. So Michael contacted me through my channel about that and suggested we exchange numbers and have a call. And that began our friendship. Michael was in Florida. I myself am now in Kentucky and was at the time. I'm a California native, though. Michael was in Florida and also a native to Florida and apparently grew up just an hour outside of Gainesville. At that time, I believe he was living alone, but shortly thereafter, his girlfriend, whom we'll be hearing some comments from in a little later in the show, moved in with him and stayed for about 6 months before they had a mutually agreeable separation. Michael had his family nearby in Cross City, which was about an hour away, which included his father, his mother, and 2 younger brothers. All of this information I didn't become aware of until his death. Michael had taken an interest in the Aurora event to the extent that he was researching the topic I would imagine, on a daily basis. It seemed to me that it led to an interest in other conspiracies as well. I think that was kind of the tipping point or the turning point for him that got him down that road and got him labeled conspiracy theorist. I have no doubt that despite any earlier interest, it was Aurora that really bolstered his research of other conspiracies to the point that he became very well versed in most of them. So like myself, it was one event that was the spark that led to a life-changing shift toward interest in history, politics, geopolitics, as well as social phenomenon. So outside of our work together on the Aurora event and the views and information we shared about other topics, Michael had his own history taking place and events in his life during that time. One event that took place during this time was his dad suffering a debilitating stroke that set him back as far as having to relearn to speak, to walk, amongst other things. Unbeknownst to me, Michael had begun to help his dad with his physical therapy, And from what I gather, it wouldn't have been a very encouraging experience, as his dad made little progress. Throughout 2012 into 2013, Michael made a name for himself on the web and was a known conspiracy theorist by that time. Myself and QK Ultra were amongst that group and had fairly frequent interactions with Michael. He began to work mostly with a fellow YouTuber who went by the handle Historical Records Vault. At that point, he suggested the three of us do a conference call on Aurora, which we did, and which received positive reviews. I think it was the height of research into that topic at that time. Not long after that, I released my lengthy documentary entitled The Batman Theater Shooting, It's Time to See Behind the Cloak. Michael and most other researchers were very supportive of it and did a lot to promote it. We wound up doing a part 2 conference with the three of us again, and it was clear from my perspective at least that he, Historical Records Vault, and myself had cracked Aurora and understood at least the basic elements of the conspiracy, that James Holmes was likely totally uninvolved, or at least he was not one of the shooters. So let's take a moment now and listen to a brief clip from the three-way conference that was taken, or that was undertaken back in October of 2012, I believe, between myself, Historical Records Vault, and Michael Cravey. And I think Michael is featured mostly in this one. Here we go.
The balcony exit is an exit door that's at the very top of the stairs. Only theaters 8 and 9 had those exits, according to a former, I guess she's still an employee. She's an employee there, and she says that the only 8 and 9 had the exits because they were like the largest theater. I'm not sure why they were the only ones that had it. But anyway, the Lori Schaefer interview, I just want to say real quick, in the beginning of this interview, it's in my channel or whatever, she basically talks about how they went outside and they saw people coming out, and then she's asked to further elaborate on that, and I don't know why, but apparently she changes her story, and she says, quote, like, we actually didn't leave until like 3:30. That's like 3.5 hours afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Some EMTs came and people.
Well, she describes being led out. Yeah, she describes being led out of the theater by EMTs. Right after, she just describes running out of the back door of the theater. So she's outside, and then she puts herself back in until the cops get there, and the cops let her out. So it's two different stories.
It's much bigger than I think media being involved. I'm thinking hospitals involved, the police. I'm talking like, I can't imagine, like, there has to be so many people in on this.
And that was a big deal, since had we been able to continue the research, and if no unexpected roadblocks slowed us down, we could have easily uncovered the larger conspiracy and maybe even the motive. In the months after Aurora, Michael and others tended to congregate and share information on Facebook groups. Most required an invitation, but some didn't. Michael wound up being part of at least 2 of the larger groups, and likely others that I am unaware of. Eventually, Michael had a disagreement with the group administrators, or at least a couple of administrators, and that led to Michael being banned from one or both of the larger James Holmes and or Batman theater shooting groups. But I don't have the details of how that played out. Soon after that, Michael discovered through publicly available resources that one particular administrator, a Misty Dawn Hoosier, was a felon located in Florida where he lived. And the significance of this woman will come into play later. Michael then made a YouTube video and started a thread on one particular thread on a popular conspiracy forum announcing his findings about this Misty Dawn Hoosier person. He titled the thread, "Master Thief Racketeer Running Largest Aurora Shooting Case Website," which I think is actually an appropriate title. By that time, he was already receiving threats, not from Misty, but from quote-unquote anonymous YouTube accounts that had been created within a day or two of the threats. So it seems clear the whole point of those accounts was to make those threats against Michael. And my opinion is that those accounts were created by Misty. The criminal history of Misty includes some newsworthy items. She had been involved in a crime spree ending in 2006 involving dressing up as store employees and making away with a total of, not in one case, but in the course of her spree, a total of over $150,000 in merchandise. And that's what they were able to nail her with, but maybe there was more. Potentially there was. The news reports didn't explain the details of how she got the merchandise out of the store, explaining that the store security and the law enforcement personnel were studying her creative methods. And so honestly, I could not imagine what it was she was doing, but somehow they were impressed with her successful, or maybe they were just absolutely embarrassed at how lax the store security was, and they wanted not to have to reveal that it was just a simple case of putting things in a cart and pushing it out. But I highly doubt that. And I'm paraphrasing here, right? She was also found to have sold many of the stolen items on sites like eBay, which included some international purchases. She had a storage unit that she outfitted with shelves in order to present the merchandise. And she would, likely arrange local purchases there. As a result of being caught, her charges included RICO, or racketeering charges. For an individual to be brought up on RICO charges is highly unusual. Her bail was set at $25,000, so she paid, $2,500 cash to be released. What likely caused Michael to be suspicious of Misty's involvement in the Aurora Truth movement was how, from this point on in Misty's charges, or in Misty's criminal history, the charges kept getting dropped. And in fact, I believe she was sentenced to a house arrest situation for a very brief time as a result of the RICO charge. If it wasn't totally dropped. I don't have the specific details on that instance. From 2006 to 2012, she does have a couple of arrests for, no registration, no insurance, no ID, the basic driving offenses. But most of those charges are also dropped. So, she was in a compromising situation. She had good internet and social media skills, and she had an established online persona, all of which make her an ideal candidate as an informant with any number of law enforcement agencies. So, in my opinion, Misty was instructed to set up the James Holmes is Innocent Facebook group, which was quickly populated by other internet sock puppets. From this platform, then, others like Michael were drawn in, and it took off from there. Misty was likely reporting to her superiors. She was probably reporting to her superiors things like who was emerging as a leader, what theories were gaining traction, and responding to other specific requests that they would be putting to her as well for information. Michael almost certainly would have been on one of those lists or one of those reports provided by Misty. Despite his use of the pseudonym Thomas Brinkley, the feds would have easily known it was connected to Michael, and as well as every other detail of Michael's life, as we've now come to learn with the whole blow up of the NSA, which we now basically just assume it was a conspiracy theory. And it was kind of for the fringe element of society to suspect that we were being observed or recorded 24 hours a day in every place. But as it turns out, that apparently is true. I'm just reiterating what I've been hearing in the reports in the past year, maybe a little longer than a year. I, of course, was in that fringe element before that time. But it's quite an epiphany for me to see how things now are just being accepted. It seems as if they just kind of washed over us all. If the feds were interested in Michael before he was banned from the group and came out against Misty, would they have prevented her from retaliating in the way that she did? I can't say. When threatening messages and emails were sent to Michael at that point, I can't even say for sure the author was Misty. Sock puppets and disinfo agents often work in shifts and exchange identities in some cases. Both Misty and Michael were aware of their close proximity in Florida at that point. Michael continued to post comments to the thread that he started, speculating that Misty was on the take and posting the threatening messages that he was receiving as well. He would post them. He would redact a certain part, trying to be he was a very intelligent guy. So for him to do that made all kinds of sense, both printing it for all to see, displaying it, providing it for everyone to, because that was his point. He wanted to help others to avoid the pitfalls that the whole concept of the shill or the counter operative, the disinformation operative presents to people who are in pursuit of the truth. And pursuit of the truth is not just a regular job. It's something that you do as a personal interest, as a hobby, and an important hobby, I would imagine. Maybe that's not the best word to describe it, but it certainly is a personal issue, and you're not making any money when you're searching for the truth. If you're making money, you're not necessarily searching for the absolute truth. You might come close, but it's more likely you're searching for profits or something. Anyway, Misty responded to Michael printing of these threatening email messages or comments with fabricated claims of being stalked by Michael. When Michael refused to back down and recant his position, at that point, Misty filed a restraining order against him. And that request was rejected for lack of evidence. Then Michael receives an email from Misty herself. She's not pretending, she's not sock puppeting, she's not using a proxy. And she was threatening to stop by so they could hash things out. And because of the proximity, it was then that Michael files a restraining order suit of his own because he wanted to put an end to this. It had just been out of hand. She failed to appear at the hearing, and the judge appears to have set a court date to address her claims. In talking with Michael's girlfriend at that time, she revealed that Michael eventually dropped the suit because he wasn't entirely sure she was an informant and thought she might simply be an abrasive idiot, who got in over her head, whether she was actually on the take or not. She certainly was an abrasive idiot. I can assure you of that. I want to switch now to the events of March 3rd, 2014, just a couple months ago. Michael's father had died a few months earlier, and he had moved in with his mother to support her in the wake of his father's death. She lived in Cross City, which is about an hour west of Gainesville. From Michael's mother's account, he had been restless during the night and said he was going to Gainesville when he left the house at about 6:30 a.m. Let's listen to a news report of the events that took place a short time later that morning.
Shortly after 7 o'clock this morning, the University Police Department began an investigation into a suspect who was later identified as Michael Cravey, who had apparently at random stabbed someone on UF campus. We were alerted of the situation, and apparently the University Police Department was pursuing him and somehow lost him in traffic. Later on in the morning, the suspect vehicle was spotted westbound on Archer Road. So we, with University Police, got into the area, and we haven't even begun chasing the suspect yet when he crashed into a vehicle on Archer Road near 37th Boulevard. It was then reported that he had run into the Butler Plaza area, possibly into one of the stores here. Once officers got on scene here, we began looking for the suspect in the parking lot, and one of our officers located the suspect in the parking lot in front of Best Buy and PetSmart, apparently with a hatchet in his hand, and he was approaching another vehicle. The officer got out, identified himself as a police officer, and challenged the suspect at gunpoint to drop the hatchet. The suspect instead ran towards the officer with the hatchet raised, and the officer was forced to use deadly force. He fired multiple shots at the suspect. It's unknown exactly how many shots were fired or hit, and the suspect was transported to the hospital where he later died of his injuries.
I was reading an article recently about an American citizen who was subject to the attention of the FBI overseas. Because he didn't accept their offer, they threatened him and forced him into a country that was not friendly to the U.S. One of the comments left about the article read, quote, "After more than 4 decades, I concluded that the worst thing that can happen to anyone in the USA is to be noticed by the government. I have yet to be disabused of that notion." One of the methods being used to support the notion that Michael snapped and it was his actions that brought about his death is the spread of the theory he was mentally ill, or that he was at least mentally unstable. To begin with, Michael created a kind of Truman Show of his own making, which not only cataloged his behavior over countless hours, it also contained endless psychoanalytic data. I mean, he would be espousing his opinions, his theories, his concerns, his values throughout this video archive. So obviously, when one considers that most people have the luxury of keeping their innermost thoughts to themselves, offhanded critiques of someone who dared to share this with the world is a bit disingenuous. I suspect that anyone else doing the same thing Michael did would garner as many critics, okay? So I don't take many of these opinions regarding his state of mind into consideration. However, my personal view of the record Michael left behind and from my personal interactions with him lead me to think he might have had some issues. But for me to even identify what they might have been would be worthless since I'm not versed in those matters. I think to broadly define it would be to say he may have had some mild delusions, but maybe only for a brief time or within a narrow area. In no way am I implying he was delusional. I would say the same of myself, really. He may as well have been depressed to some degree, whether it was mild, moderate, or intermittent, so that it would have been a form of mania, I can't say. But in the extreme, I would say moderate depression at most. I have mild to moderate depression, although I'm fortunate to have had it my entire adult life, and it's consistent. I don't have to have mood swings. The consistency of it makes it easier to manage and to have a consistent personality. I pride myself in having a strong and consistent personality, which means people who know me can count on my personality. Because I know I'll be and have already been criticized for glossing over Michael's behavior that might reflect psychological problems. I've made sure to include some of the best examples in my selection of clips of him acting badly, I guess, or to put it broadly. In the case of the very short clip I'm about to play, this is the most extreme example of violent rhetoric or display of anger I found. The clip is from his last video, taken on January 3rd of this year, and it is entitled Wild Ride. Let's listen.
I'm going to read what's written here, okay? Have you heard the story of Lavina Johnson? Lavina Johnson was a soldier who enlisted in the Army. What happened was found appalling, gunshot wound to the head, broken nose, black eye, loose teeth, acid burns on her genitals, probably to cover up that she was raped, and a trail of blood leading away from her tent. What's even more appalling is the Department of Defense has officially ruled her death a suicide. Not surprising. It happened under your fucking watches. Do you understand me? The autopsy report of the photographs revealed that her death was inconsistent with a suicide and looked consistent with a rape murder. But as far as the U.S. Criminal Investigative Command for the Army is concerned, the case remains closed. Her father became suspicious when he saw her body in the funeral home and decided to investigate. At first, the Department of the Army refused. Now, have I vetted the story? I don't know. I'm so mad. Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing else to say. There's nothing else to say. You're looking at an insane person right now. Because a sane person would go around and start doing bad things to bad people.
Now, to repeat, that was the behavior I found to be the most likely indicative of instability. For instance, when he clearly goes from 0 to 100 on the anger scale about how the incident he's reading about happened, quote, on our watch. And secondly, at the end, he wraps up by saying that the viewer is looking at an insane person, because a sane person would go around and start doing bad things to bad people. I've not only listened and watched the clip you've just heard numerous times, but I've also watched the hour-long video it's taken from. I can say with conviction that I completely understood what Michael was conveying. So if that means I'm insane and Michael was insane, then I would suggest we need to redefine these terms. I'd like to read now a comment that was left on the conspiracy forum Lunatic Outpost, and it was left last month by someone on a thread that was specifically about the untimely death of Michael Cravey. One must also consider the possibility that agents who are in cahoots with those that may have something to do with Cravey's death might have arrived on message boards and places in the media where they knew his death would be looked at in more detail and ahead of time, and made some postings to paint a false motivation for their trolling of particular threads. Those who are co-conspirators in the kind of manufactured events that Cravey discussed have agents in the social media who are providing cover for them, because being involved in a criminal conspiracy means that they are also liable for acts taken in furtherance of that conspiracy. Therefore, these social media operators might have a huge interest in slandering someone in death that they tried to preemptively slander and discredit before disappearing or murdering that person. These people would definitely want to muddy the waters where people are taking an active interest in what may have actually happened, and in doing so, not only do they protect those who pay them to spread lies in media, but they also protect themselves because they are every bit as culpable as the murderers themselves. Some of these people may actually be pretending to want to find the truth, while those who are acting like they don't want to find it help to draw the focus away from that more subtle type of operator towards the obvious plants, so that the false narratives being floated receive less scrutiny and become more acceptable. That is truly how those who mangle the truth operate. Too bad they are often paid with our own tax dollars." End quote. After the first break coming up, I want to walk you through what actually happened that day, the nuts and bolts of this story. I know we just heard a news clip covering what they would have us believe are the main points, but in truth, what happened that day was just plain nuts. I mean, actually from out of nowhere, there was a stabbing, a car chase, a fairly severe car crash, a hatchet, and a shooting. What's needed is for someone such as myself to explain how this went down, including all the funny parts they tend to avoid. And I'll do that after the first break we're about to take. In the remaining time before our break, I want to provide the listener with some great websites where you can pursue stories like this one or for other great information. Of course, I would be remiss to not first give thanks to Sofia Smallstorm for allowing me the opportunity to guest host for her today. Remember to come back and be enthralled by Sofia's upcoming shows when she returns. You can find those at PureMomentumNetwork. That's PureMomentumNetwork. Sofia's other great websites are avatarproducts.com, that's avatarproducts.com, and aboutthesky.com, aboutthesky.com. I personally recommend you also visit YouTube and search for her incredible, groundbreaking presentation entitled Unraveling Sandy Hook in 2, 3, 4, and 5 Dimensions. But if you just search Unraveling Sandy Hook, I'm sure it'll come up. To find my material, please visit YouTube and simply search for Tyranny News Network. My blog address is tyrannynews.com. That's tyrannynews.com. We're coming up now on our first break, but stay tuned, because immediately following the break, I will break it down for you and explain all of the bizarreness surrounding Michael Cravey's untimely death. Stay tuned.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Deborah Taveras of StopTheCrime.net, and I welcome you to Stop the Crime on the Pure Momentum Network. I am committed to exposing the ongoing war being waged not only against all American people, but the entire global population by international central banking cabals and their minions. We will be talking to you about the silent weaponized systems of assaults upon the population, which will help to define what everybody knows: something is terribly wrong. The corporate banking system has created the illusion that we have a legitimate government, and we do not. This corporate structure has gradually taken control of our country's economy, legal system, intelligence, military, scientific, and political operations. Only by understanding your reality will you be able to engage in solutions. And there are solutions. And we must engage. We must help others. We must live in right conduct and not be afraid. Visit us on the Pure Momentum Network and stopthecrime.net.
An amount necessary or sufficient to have a significant effect or to achieve a result. This is critical mass.
Greetings, fellow organic beings on planet Earth. My name is Pamela Tartar. I host Critical Mass on Pure Momentum Network. My awareness tells me humanity is reaching a tipping point. A choice must be made. Either we choose continuing under ever-worsening tyranny, or we stand up in our humanity and create a new world of love, abundance, compassion, empathy, and all the human attributes and features. I invite you to join me as we explore who we are and find tools inside us, enabling us to stand tall and strong against the opposition. Now is the time. Pamela Tartar, Critical Mass.
Welcome back to Speed of Light with Sofia Smallstorm. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Peter Klein, and I am guest hosting for this special episode of Speed of Light. The title of today's program is The Mysterious and Untimely Death of Michael Cravey, otherwise known as Thomas Brinkley. I want to remind the listener that the Pure Momentum Network is a listener-supported outfit that provides the full first hour of each program to all who are interested. However, each show contains a treasure trove of programming in the form of a full second hour, requiring membership. It is very affordable and very important that you subscribe today. Visit PureMomentum.net to do so now. And spread the word. It's so damn easy with social media. There's email, telegrams. You can put a message inside of a bottle. Or you can just tweet the site or pop over to Facebook and enlighten a friend. As I said before the break, I am going to break down what exactly happened on the day that my friend Michael Cravey was killed. There are far too many little reported or unreported elements that need to be exposed so that we as a society can determine how best to proceed from here. It's safe to say that I am not accepting of the official account of events. Wait till you hear, in their attempts to portray Michael as the insane bad guy, wait till you hear what they've come up with as a hobby for Michael's supposed stabbing victim. It is, to be generous, totally ludicrous. Well, we'll let you decide. But now I'd like to play another news clip from that day to get a feel for what Floridians were fed on March 3rd, 2014.
Marcus, any word from investigators on the motive for the stabbing?
Well, Mary, no word right now on the motive for that stabbing, but we are in the parking lot of this Best Buy where the crime scene tape has come down. Earlier today, this area was just completely wrapped off in crime scene tape. It went from this Best Buy all the way over to this PetSmart, and right now investigators are trying to figure out just how many shots were fired. An area filled with shops turns into a crime scene.
I couldn't believe it. It's like on TV. It's just, you don't really think anything like that's going to happen. I was in the service, and it just brought back a lot of memories. It was pretty scary.
Police say it started around 7 this morning when a man and his wife were sitting in their car on the campus of UF. They say the couple had a brief discussion with Cravey, then he went to his car and got a knife and then stabbed the man. Police chased Cravey for a while, but he was driving the wrong way on a major highway, so they decided it was too dangerous to continue chasing him. At the time, officers say they didn't have much of a suspect description.
We don't know what his intentions were there, but we do know that he had already stabbed someone earlier that day.
Police say Cravey crashed his Jeep into a car at a Dunkin' Donuts in the area and that he took off towards Best Buy. They say they were forced to start shooting at Cravey after he approached them with a hatchet with a blade about 4 inches long. Even hours after the shooting, the area was blocked off by crime scene tape. People were allowed to go into stores and shop. Meanwhile, investigators tried to figure out exactly how many shots were fired. Police say they were taking Cravey to the hospital, but he later died.
He gave the suspect time to drop the hatchet and surrender, and instead he came towards the officer with the hatchet raised.
Investigators say they're talking to witnesses and looking at surveillance video.
It's a sad day for a family, for Gainesville. You know, this is not something that generally happens, you know, nationally. We don't get this kind of recognition, but again, these things happen everywhere.
Marcus, any word whether Cravey had a criminal past?
Well, we did ask the public information officer for the Gainesville Police Department that question, and he has not gotten back to us just yet. We did do some digging of our own, and we did find out that 2 women filed domestic violence injunctions against him, one in 2005, the other one in 2012. We're also learning that he did have 3 traffic violations, and police did find out early this morning that it was Michael Cravey involved in this stabbing, so they were able to speak to some of his family members early today.
Marcus White reporting to us live from Gainesville.
So there you have it. A guy gets 3 traffic infractions, and the unbearable weight of it causes him to snap and go on a stabbing and hatchet-wielding spree. I have to credit that news outfit, though, because they were kind enough to avoid adding the point that Michael was, quote, consumed by internet conspiracy theories, unquote. The news stories don't seem to be all that problematic, but, of course, they're not really providing much information. Not even a speculation of motive. But having read through the first police report provided by the University of Florida Police Department and the written reports in the local media, I noted numerous conflicts and otherwise unexplainable coincidences. Let's start by noting that the 3rd of March, a Monday, was the first day of spring break. So the university would just happen to be a ghost town that morning. And the first incident was reported to have been at roughly 6:55 a.m. The reported time of 6:55 is significant because Michael's last known whereabouts was at home with his mother in Cross City. She claimed that as she was leaving for work, Michael left Cross City for Gainesville, an hour away. So the problem is that she claimed he left at 6:30. So if the times are accurate, that leaves 25 minutes for Michael to have traveled, or to travel what averages an hour. So this doesn't leave any time to dilly-dally. Why was Michael going to that parking lot on campus so early in the morning in the first place? He apparently pulled in and parked. The claim is that a couple who were both staff at the university, Cliff and Becky Preston, had just pulled in after Michael and noticed him getting out of his Jeep. They claimed to find him out of place because of being familiar with the cars that parked in the lot at that time. He is said to have passed by the rear of the car looking at their license plate for some reason and approached the couple, immediately asking the man, "Do you have a gun?" To which he paused and replied, "No." From that point, they claim to not recall what the conversation was about, aside from something about Michael being there to meet a Mike Potter and his asking them if they knew Mike Potter. I have no reasonable explanation for this aspect of the story, which could simply be disinformation anyway. After this brief exchange, Michael was said to have returned to his Jeep before engaging the couple again, this time brandishing a knife. Apparently, there's a short chase before Michael is said to have tackled Cliff Preston and began stabbing him. 2 female witnesses who were meeting in the area report that Michael had been laughing while chasing Preston and seemed to enjoy the stabbing. For no explained reason, Michael then halts his attack and wanders back over to his Jeep, leaving Preston lying on the sidewalk by the road. One of the female witnesses calls 911 from inside her car. This is a recording of that call.
911 status of the emergency.
Hi, this is a really big emergency. Someone just got stabbed.
Where at?
Buckman.
Are you on campus?
Yeah, it was right at Buckman University, by the Chem Lab parking lot.
Chem Lab, okay. All right, just stay on the line with me, okay? Is this Buckman Drive?
Yes.
All right, just stay on the line with me. We're getting some help to you, all right?
Okay.
What's the phone number you're calling from area code first?
Oh my God, he's gonna hit me. Oh my God, he's gonna hit me.
What's the phone number you're calling from area code first? And tell me exactly what happened.
I was parking to pick up my friend, and this guy screamed, oh my God, he screamed, okay, and he screamed, help me, and I thought something was going on, because someone was laughing, And actually had a knife and started stabbing him when he grabbed his wallet.
Where did he get stabbed?
His neck, yeah. He's still alive.
Okay. Well, like I said, we're getting some help. Just stay on the line with me, okay? Where is he at? Where's the suspect at right now?
The suspect just drove away in his car, I think.
What kind of vehicle?
It was a dark Jeep.
Like, do you know the color? Do you know what kind of Jeep? Was it like a Wrangler?
Type of Jeep.
It's in there. No.
It was a dark green or a black. I think someone just arrived on scene.
What does he look like? White, black, or Hispanic?
He was white.
White. How old was he?
He was probably late 20s, early 20s.
Which way did he go? Do you know, on university?
He went on campus towards like the hub.
Okay. Like I said, we're getting some help to you. Just stay on the line with me, okay? What's your name? Did you know the person? Did you know the suspect?
No, I didn't know anybody. I just was driving and saw it.
Okay, what was he wearing?
Jeans. It was like might have been sort of like a tan sweatshirt.
Okay, are you with the patient?
No, I'm standing by watching. I wasn't sure if it was safe for me to get out.
Okay. How can you go to a patient?
Yeah, there's people giving him medical attention now.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us and at least sharing, a little bit about Michael from a firsthand standpoint. And I guess maybe the best way to utilize your presence is to go directly to those types of questions, his personality and just your honest opinion. So the first question I have is, in general, how would you sum up Michael's general personality?
Well, I think the thing is that he had this whole YouTube persona that people have the wrong impression of him about, and it was kind of like he acted a certain way because it was kind of like, it was somewhat of a joke. He acted a certain way on YouTube because he wanted to seem like a total cliche.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like the joke was on everyone else because that was far from who he really was.
Gotcha. Interesting.
If that makes any sense.
Oh, no, it makes absolute sense. I mean, he stated that, I believe, in if he didn't say it exactly, he said some form of, some iteration of that a number of times.
I mean, it was just not that he was pretending to say these things or believe in these things. He totally did. He was just pretending to act a certain way because the joke was on everyone else.
Well, and he did, I think, have at one point in time, it was kind of a strategic move on his part. And that ties into a lot of what I think people have blown it. Well, I think it's very true that it's a very distinct possibility that he's right, that he did draw attention to himself from people who were involved in these various nefarious acts.
I feel like people could still really see who he was as a person. He was such a kind and, in a way, innocent soul. And I think that innocence is what kind of brought him into the conspiracy theory and him wanting to make a difference and change things for the better because he couldn't stand to see like the injustices that are happening. He couldn't stand to see people hurting. He couldn't stand to see things going to shit. So he wanted to make a difference in his own way. And I honestly feel like his downfall was his like innocent naivety, kind of. He wanted to give people the benefit of the doubt. He would even say sometimes that like the only way to get past all of this and to make things right was forgiveness and was love. Because he was such a loving person.
I agreed with him. And we had different views. I come from a different place with that because I'm what's called a voluntarist, which means I don't participate. Well, my ideal form of a community or a government is to participate only if you are willing, and so nothing would happen unless I agreed to participate, and then it would be up to me to fulfill my obligations. It's like ultimate personal responsibility, And I always saw that Michael, he was an example of somebody who actually had the potential, at least, if not was actually someone who actually lived up to their responsibility to others. And so that made him, I think, maybe subconsciously, like walking around in the hopeful sense that others were also of that mindset, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this then. What do you think motivated Michael to begin research into conspiracies at all? Was there any like one thing, or was there a time? What do you think?
I don't think there was any one specific thing. I think it was just something that interested him, and it was a way for him to try and help people in his own way. I think that I think he just needed to feel like he was making a big difference. And he was, and he did.
Sure.
So...
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, as you were saying that, I'm thinking, yeah, who the hell else was doing it? Who the hell else is doing this work, you know?
Yeah,
it's so true. He stepped in and filled the need, you know?
Uh-huh.
So I could see,
He was a very, very selfless person. He would help anybody.
Yeah, so it's sad. I mean, I'm sorry to have to even say that, but yeah, it's absolutely sad. Mm-hmm. And I know that you, I want to, I guess, mention that you were actually in a, you lived together and were in a relationship. And of course, as that sometimes does, that led to, prospects of marriage and continued relationships and all that. And of course, obviously something with Michael's passing, it really puts a hitch in everything that's going on, obviously. But I guess I don't want to go down that path. So let me just, if I could, is it okay if I ask just a couple more questions?
Sure.
You got time? I don't want to, dig too deep. And you're only, I would appreciate any kind of tidbits. I love to get the story of who Michael was, and that's important. I think all the speculation is a bunch of ridiculousness. The problem is the media is never going to portray him how he was. They never even show the guy. They mentioned his YouTube. He was he was a well-known figure on YouTube in the conspiracy community, and yet all they do is they show like a Facebook photo of him or so, which is pretty, it's open to interpretation, that's for sure. For God's sakes, he might not even be from America. You see this picture of a guy. He could be Brazilian or something. Let me just say, or ask you, I was a real geek. I was a big misfit in school. So I'm just wondering, let's say from high school onward, how did Michael relate to others socially, and how did others react to Michael?
Well, many times when Michael and I were out in town in Gainesville, he knew everybody, and everybody loved him. He was very popular, very well liked. There was never a problem with that. He liked being out. He loved socializing. He loved being outdoors. We worked out every single day.
Wow.
He really liked human contact. He loved being around people, and everyone in Gainesville knew who he was, and they all loved him. There was never a problem with anything like that. He was never antisocial.
Mm-hmm.
There's this, I feel like there's just this wrong idea about the kind of person that he was, and it's not true.
Well, then I guess the question for me is, because I had the sense, and this is partly my fault, and I was very, very upset when I realized, I went back and watched a couple of videos that he had done toward the end, and he appeared to be wanting to have more interaction. And when I saw that, I thought, well, I don't know what to say. I'm busy and I don't have anything more to add to this Aurora thing. And that was where we were.
This is my theory on that. There were some people that came into his life in the last few months where they were supposedly tipping him off to things. I don't know who these people were. I don't know exactly what they were saying to him. I know some of it. He wouldn't elaborate too much over the phone, but I think that he was grasping for more answers. And they were giving him information that they wanted him to have for some reason. So he started believing certain things. It was like he didn't know who he could talk to anymore, what was correct. And he was just looking for people to give him answers because they were feeding him something.
Do you think that might have led to why he was, heading to that parking lot on the campus so early in the morning on that morning?
I honestly don't know why he would have done that. I don't know what he was doing there. that part I don't know if I'll ever understand or have an answer to. From what he was texting me, it had nothing to do with him being there or meeting anybody. He never told me anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
important. In the morning or weekend.
That's an important point. I want to make sure for the listeners, you actually were receiving text messages from him up until that morning. Is that correct?
That entire morning I was until, I want to say 8:30 his time.
Wow. Yeah. No kidding. 8:30 his time. Would you understand that the stabbing incident was supposed to have taken place at, I'm going to say, roughly 6:55 a.m.?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, the implications of that are huge. It's a sad reality to, I knew this going into this, but and Michael, of course, knew. He would not have been surprised at the aftermath, but then to see the story that they're putting out there officially, and then to hear from you that he is texting. Now, I imagine it's probably not it's not really even possible to be on a stabbing spree and then running from the cops at high speed going the wrong way, all while texting you. Oh,
yeah. Probably one text every minute, I would say. Nothing pertaining to meeting somebody, nothing pertaining to anything like this whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Michael would have told me. He would have told me what was going on, especially if he felt like it was unsafe.
Oh, yeah. He was a smart character. He's not someone who's, it's not about pride or about, I can handle it. He was not stupid. And when you're in a situation, you try to get the word out, and so I agree that would probably, and you, of course, are the person who would know better than I, so.
we had a safety word as well in case anything was wrong.
Oh.
And I never received anything like that.
Wow. So he never even gave the safety word, meaning that from his perspective, things were okay, relatively. And I won't bother to ask you about the content of those messages. I understand that that's private information, and that's not something that I personally would want to share. And that's also very important information that could be useful for you individually. And I think you deserve to know more about, at least more about what really happened than the rest of us out here in Radio Land, and So I'll leave that just to you. But let me ask you then, what about his lifestyle? In the end, it seemed like you were saying that there were these people that had come into his life and that were feeding him some information that was inside information, and hopefully they weren't, they didn't have any ill will toward him. Do you think there was anything else in his life that seemed like it was a lifestyle shift that might have made him more reclusive, or was a problem or something?
I don't think so at all. I think that he moved back home to stay with his mom to help her out after his dad passed.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anything else that was really going on besides, the contact that he had with other people. He never mentioned anything else that was a problem. He knew how to control any kind of depression that he ever had. And I always admired him for how strong he was with a lot of the things that he had to deal with. And I just know that in the last few days before he passed, he was telling me that he knew he was going to get set up, and he was receiving death threats. And
that's big, the death threats thing. That's just big. It's huge.
They wanted. He specifically said to me over the phone, I think they want me to look crazy.
Yeah.
I think they want it to seem like I went crazy. He said that during our very last phone conversation.
Well, I really wish that whoever those people were or are, somehow they get fleshed out into the open. I don't know how best to go about that, and I obviously worry that someone might have some success. I certainly wouldn't encourage you to pursue it, and I wouldn't even think to pursue it without a plan of action. It's very tough because if you think about how I listened to Mae Brussel the other day, and she's a kind of like a conspiracy theorist going back into the mid-'60s. She did a radio show out in California, KPFC or something. Anyway, she was one of the first people to go, just balls to the wall conspiracy theorizing all the time. She was really brilliant. And she had some things to say about, well, like for instance, what happens is, you're a human being to the powers that be, but then if you upset them, if you tick off someone, or if you, even if it's something minor and you become essentially, you get noticed, they might just decide to move you from the box labeled human to the box labeled dispose of. And then it's all over. There's really, and it's just business. They call it wet work. It's so, they just don't really have any emotional feelings going into it. And that's kind of the training, I think. I myself was in the Navy, but, I know that it's much more severe in the other branches of service. But, they treat you, from the moment you get off the bus and you're in boot camp, the whole thing is about taking away the humanity, trying to remove the empathy, making everyone seem like the enemy. So I would definitely caution anyone who would hope that some kind of event bring them out in the open and expose them. And I have a feeling that is a distinct possibility, because the way I see it is, once one domino falls, let's say 9/11, if 9/11 were to fall, well, it's not very far from there that then the Oklahoma City bombing falls. And then that would lead to potentially Aurora. And then that would lead to Michael. And do you really think that what are your feelings or thoughts about there being a connection? Not any of the stuff that Michael specified maybe, but just in your mind, from looking at the totality of things, do you think there was a possible connection between what happened in Aurora and then how Michael's met his end a couple months ago?
I feel like that's a total possibility. I think that anything is possible at this point. So I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to say yes, certainly.
Sure.
It could be the case, and it could not be the case. I don't know.
Yeah, I would not want to. I appreciate the honesty. I know that it's sometimes I personally have to fight wanting to just blurt out that, hey, they did it, or something. Yeah. And I don't really, I try very hard not to do that. And so I appreciate when people say, well, I'll tell you one thing, I don't know, but there is a possibility. So that's interesting.
And of some of these things, and Michael knows of some of these things, obviously, the way that he was somewhat kind of intertwined in some of the things they would say, and,
Yeah. It's wild.
Story and things like that. Obviously, somehow, few of us have been brought into the situation. But
yeah. I think about it sometimes, and I wonder. It all kind of hit me after I learned of Michael, this whole event. Before that, we were, he never really said any of that stuff we were really just looking at the issue of the Aurora as that one night, that crime, and maybe going back a little ways too, because I think on the call, and I played a clip of this earlier in the show, but there was we did a couple of conferences with Historical Records Vault and myself and Michael, and it was funny because we basically all we went, oh yeah, James Holmes only lived in that apartment for a few weeks before this, which was like, we all agree, and yet the rest of the world has no clue, and they assume he's been living there forever and building bombs in his spare time,
Oh, of course.
The public. Gotta love them. God love them. Well, let me just put it there. Here's just a simple question, really. This has to do with violent, crazy outburst behavior. They say Michael stabbed a stranger repeatedly, and then later the same day rushed a cop with a hatchet raised above his head. And I would just ask you, had he ever done anything you would consider violent, on that kind of level, or even just violent? And do you think he was capable of doing what they say he did?
He never did anything violent whatsoever. He was not a violent person. He was a gentle person. He was the exact opposite.
Yeah.
There's no way. That's just not who he was.
Well, there it is. You heard it. You heard it here, folks. She's saying point blank, and I really appreciate you're taking the time. This is hugely important, because you are really, I think that to me, after having spoken with you before in the interactions we've had, and just, knowing how things go, and having had some experience with sock puppets, some real, very some intentional acts committed by people who came into my life or that I reached out to, who were certainly not there to do me any good. And you don't strike me as that way at all. And so to hear your opinion here and knowing the connection you had to Michael, it's very good. And it helps me understand that, yes, it's sad, didn't maybe go down as they say. So we have another situation here. But, I don't want to think of Michael as a guy that snapped because, even then there's a little bit of disappointment in someone doing that. You would hope that they would be able to hold back even in the most stressful of situations. But yeah,
he was way too patient. He was so patient and just calm and mild-mannered. And
I would imagine, I picture him getting stabbed a number of times before he would actually really forcefully say, "Hey, stop stabbing me,"
Exactly, yes. Exactly. Trust me, I know.
Yeah. Well, no, we haven't profiled you and your violent ratio or whatever. But well, thank you so much for taking the time, and I really hope that we get somewhere with this. And your efforts and the time you took is not going to go to waste. Certainly, everybody listening, a lot of people at least are. They have the potential to take this somewhere and to, as a community, get to the bottom of this, because apparently law enforcement isn't going to. So, thank you once again.
No problem.
And that concludes my conversation with Michael's former girlfriend, who was actually in communication with him daily up until the very day of Michael's death. And we are now up against the first hour's break. For those of you who don't know, the first hour is available to all, but the second hour is available exclusively to subscribers. So if you want to hear the continuation of my analysis, please visit PureMomentumNetwork and subscribe. It's pretty cheap and well worth it. When we continue after the break, I have an exclusive interview with QK Ultra, who was also personally acquainted with Michael. If you don't know who QK Ultra is, then you need to get a life. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
We invite all our listeners to join us in the members section for the second hour of all our shows. We encourage you to click on the subscribe button, choose a membership type, pay with PayPal, and voila, you're a member. Enjoy all Pure Momentum Network material, the second hour of all talk shows,